Hello, everyone. I'm happy to have Joy Hatchette here today with us. We are doing our webinar Wednesday right now, and I'd like to introduce her. We only have about 30 minutes, and she has a lot to share with us, so I do not want to take up her time. But a little introduction, Joy Hatchette is the Associate Commissioner of Consumer Education and Advocacy with the state of Maryland. She is responsible for overseeing outreach to Maryland consumers so that we can better understand our rights and obligations and everything insurance-based. So she tries to share that information with all of us. She was also an associate in the law offices of Gordon, Feinblatt, Rothman, Hofberger, and Hollander. That's a lot of names. She was an associate there, and she was also a judicial law clerk for the United States Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. She's a graduate of the University of Virginia Law School and is a member of the bar associations in Maryland, Virginia, and DC. So Joy, we really appreciate you being with us today and teaching us what we don't know or what we should know about business and insurance. So take it away. You have the rest of the time.
Thanks so much, and thanks for inviting me. And so first, where I always like to start is explaining to people who we are. I work for the state of Maryland, and I work for an agency called the Maryland Insurance Administration. And that agency is the agency that regulates the business of insurance. We make sure that insurance companies, insurance producers, and you guys probably know them as agents and brokers, and anyone that sells or does the business of insurance in Maryland, we are the regulatory entity. So really, what does that mean? Well, in terms of businesses and consumers, we are making sure that the policies that are sold, the rates that are charged, the forms that are used are all done in accordance with Maryland law. We also are the place that if you have an issue with an insurance company, that you can come for help, either an explanation as to, well, why is this happening this way? Or why does it say this in my policy? And also, if you have an issue with an insurance company, we're the state agency that you can come to, and we will investigate what the company is doing. And if they're doing something that's in violation of Maryland law, we can make sure that you get what you're entitled to under your contract. But that's the key thing to remember, that insurance is a contract. And just like any other contract, you have rights, but you also have obligations. And so in order for you to get what you're entitled to, you have to abide by the terms of the contract. So today I'm going to focus really on what businesses should think about, and that's the small businesses when it comes to insurance. But when you also, if you have questions or issues about your personal auto, home, life, or health policy, feel free to go to our website, and I'll put our website in the chat once we're done, and look at all the information that we have available. We have lots of information on our website. And also you can follow us on social media, because we try to put out our information in tidbits. So, I mean, I know how busy you guys are. So we don't try to like say, okay, the only way you're going to learn is to sit down and spend 3 hours reading this book. That's not practical for business owners. So what we try to do is just give you tidbits. Now, I am going to really briefly go over some of the high points. And then I want to make sure that I give you guys enough time to ask any questions that you might have. So the place that I always like to start is spending a little bit and only a couple of minutes talking about the importance of commercial auto policies. Because so many small businesses assume that their personal auto policy will cover them when they're doing business. So let's say you've got a small business and a small catering business or a small delivery business, and you've got 1 or 2 employees, and you let that employee use your personal vehicle to make deliveries. Well, if you're allowing them to use your personal automobile and they are in an accident and they do damage, more likely than not, under the terms of your personal auto policy, that's not going to be covered because they're using your car for a business purpose as opposed to the reason that it's normally insured to do your business. So I tell people it's really key to talk to your trusted insurance agent or producer to make sure they understand what your business does and what you're using that automobile for. And another piece that may not apply to any of you, but I also like to point this out. If you happen to have kids that are using the vehicle, your personal vehicle, to drive for Uber, Lyft, or any of those other food service delivery companies, more likely than not, that's not going to be covered under your personal automobile policy. You need to get a separate policy for that. And Uber and Lyft will offer those policies, but it's important that you understand when those policies kick in, because it's all about whether or not you are in the process of picking up a customer, picking up the food that you're delivering. All of those things go into play when in fact you're looking if you have a claim. So all of that is really important for the personal auto side. And while we're talking about sort of doing things from home, let's talk a minute about operating a business out of your home. A lot of us have now really, especially over the last 16 months or so, started to do more things from our home. I mean, I'm working from home. I have state equipment in my home, my laptop, my printer, tons and tons of books and things of that nature. So the question is, if someone breaks into my home and steals those things, is that going to be covered under my homeowner's policy, or is it going to be covered under the state's business policy? More likely than not, it's going to be something that's covered under the state's policy, not my own personal home policy. But let's say instead of working for the state, I've set up my own business. I do something like sell Amway, or I have catering and I'm doing all of the cooking at home. And basically, what happens if I have a fire at home and either all my Amway products or the things that I use for my catering, all of that is destroyed? Well, under most personal homeowners policies, you will not have coverage because that's considered operating as a business. And those business items and things typically are not covered. And even if there may be some coverage, there are probably going to be monetary limits on how much coverage there is. For example, if you've got, I've got a basic laptop, but if you've got, because of what you do, a really expensive and extensive computer equipment, and let's say you do photography from your home, all of those things may not be covered. So it's once again really important to talk to a trusted advisor and find out, okay, first of all, are these things covered at all? And if so, are they covered to the full extent of my investment? So if I have a $10,000 worth of computer equipment, do I have enough insurance to cover that equipment? And also, can I prove to the insurance company the value of that equipment? And what do I mean, can I prove? One of the things in the claims process, if you have a loss, the insurance company is going to want to know the value of your claim. And when I used to do, like when I first started doing this a number of years ago, for the most part, insurance companies, if you said stuff was worth X amount of dollars, they basically took your word for it. And unless it was they had some reason to doubt you, they would normally just pay the claim. But under the terms of the contract, they're not required to do that. They are permitted to ask for proof. So what you need to do is to be ready to prove how much your stuff is worth. So how do you do that? You keep great records, and basically records based on serial numbers, pictures, all of that, a really extensive inventory. And anytime you add something or make upgrades, you update that inventory. And then here's the key. Where do you store the inventory? Not at your business. Because if you have a fire and your business is destroyed, there goes your inventory. So what we tell people, either to store it in the cloud, store it in a safety deposit box, but put it someplace that is accessible so that if you need it, you can get it very quickly. And that's the case for both a home-based business and for businesses if you either own the building or are renting the building. So let's move away for a minute from the home-based business and say that you are actually operating your business at another location. So you've got two things that might be happening there. You may own the building, or you may be renting the space. So if you are renting the space, then what you're going to need is insurance. Well, and let me say this, the type of insurance you're going to need if you are renting the space may be dictated by the terms of your rental agreement. You need to look very closely at that, because clearly you're going to need to have insurance on your inventory and your equipment. But under the terms of that lease, are you required to insure anything else? Are you required to have insurance on any of the property owner's items? And some leases do require that. So you need to look carefully at the terms. Now, when it comes to if you own the building and yourself, or if you're in the business of leasing, then you're interested in making sure that the building, the structure is insured properly. So that, once again, I can't say enough how important it is to find that trusted insurance advisor that understands the particulars of what you do. Because an insurance advisor that only knows a small amount or a small limited information about your business cannot properly advise you. Let's say that you are operating a business out of your home and you've got people that are, you're a photographer, and you've got people coming in and out of your house all day long. Well, you're going to need a certain type of liability coverage to protect you in case somebody falls on your property. And it's a different type of liability coverage if you are renting a space and the building owner is responsible for what goes on in the parking lot, but then you become responsible for what goes on within the structure. So it's really important that you think about, okay, where do all of the various risks come from? And what can I do to protect my assets from those risks? And just remember, if your assets aren't protected properly, then you are putting your monetary security at risk. The other thing that I really want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about is, now we know, based on all of the hacking and other scams that we've seen, how important it is that you put in place and think about getting cyber protection. If you in any way deal with financial information or personal information, including social security numbers, any of that personal identifying information, if people are paying you using credit cards, you need to consider purchasing an insurance policy to protect against that, someone either hacking into you, or inadvertently you just click a link that you think is appropriate, and therefore they get access to all of your clients' information. Now, the other thing that I talk about all the time, and this is not just for you as business owners, but also for you as homeowners: flood insurance. First of all, you need to remember that your homeowner's policy doesn't cover flooding, and many of your traditional commercial policies don't cover flooding. So you would need to buy a separate flood insurance policy to cover either the structure or your property. But once again, you need to have a basic understanding of what that contract does and doesn't cover, because flood insurance definitely has limitations on the coverages. And the other thing that I should spend just a minute or two on, the pandemic over the last 16 months has, I think, shown people where some of the gaps in their policies are. One of the big gaps was the business interruption, because a lot of businesses thought that they may, under their typical business insurance policy, have coverage when they had to shut down because of the pandemic. Only one or two carriers under the traditional business interruption policies covered things like the pandemic. And what I tell people is, once again, talk to your trusted advisor, because there are a couple of companies that, at least in the beginning of the pandemic, were writing for business interruption. Now, whether there's an appetite to write those types of policies, I'm just not sure, because there's so many unknowns out there. Now, I've covered a ton of stuff. I hope I haven't bored you to tears, but I want to open it up for any questions you might have.
Well, Joy, I don't know if that just scared me, or I'm scared. I'm happy to know all that information. So thank you for relaying all of that, because you know, when you need the insurance, you're stressed and it's chaotic, and the last thing you want to know is like, oh, I didn't know, you know. And so I appreciate you sharing all that you did. There's a question about, and you and I had talked about this, about consultants. So someone who is self-employed as a consultant, business coach, life coach, whatever that is. What kind of different insurances should they have?
So that basically, what you're trying to do is, as a consultant, you are a couple of different things. To the extent that you're meeting with people, if you're meeting with people online and not inviting them into your home, then you don't necessarily need to have extensive liability coverage for your home. But where you get into the need is, let's say you tell me, Joy, that's a great idea for you to go out and spend all of this money buying these things. And you're basically telling me what to do and how to purchase things, and it goes awry. Then you feasibly, depending on the contract that you've entered into with you as a consultant and your client, there's a potential, because we know people will sue for anything. You just need to make sure, when it comes to the liability portion of the policy, that you have protections there. Basically protecting that relationship, and basically making sure that there's language that will protect you if, in fact, the way that you're giving advice, it's just like when you're giving financial advice, you don't have an opening for that person to file an action against you. So it's more on your primary concern is the liability piece, but also it's, to some extent, if you're consulting somebody who is developing a brand new product, and they're like trade secrets and things like that, and later on the client says, well, you gave away to the world my trade secrets, you need to protect yourself really more against the litigation that may come as a result of your consulting. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that was great. If a business wants to do an event, for instance, and it's a fairly large event, let's just say, and it's at a venue, it's at a hotel or it's at something like that. Is there anything that they need to be wary of insurance wise?
So there are multiple things. Most venues are going to require that you have a liability policy in place to protect their business. So basically, if somebody that's comes to your event and slips and falls, most of those venues are going to want you to either have a bond or a policy that basically holds them harmless. Then they're also going to want to see your plan for the event. I know during COVID, I mean, there were all these things that the venues required you to have in place. So you really need, you're thinking about your liability for your own business, but you're also thinking about any hold harmless agreements or other agreements that the venue is going to have. And then if you're having an event and you're having food catered in and or other things that are brought in, that even also may need a liability policy in place for that.
I mean, who knew, right? Can't be just easy, like, how, come on over to the hotel. No, it can't be that easy.
No.
Well, good. Well, good. Well, Joy, we're just right on time, and I want to thank you once again for being so open, and how you explain it is so clear. So thank you for doing that for us. And we will have this once again as a recorded session. So if anyone would like to share this or watch it again, feel free. You could just go to our YouTube channel. You'll see it there, and you can click and share and view it and do all kind of stuff. And hopefully we're going to have Joy back at a future date for some other educational things for businesses. So once again, Joy Hatchette, we here at Northwest Chamber, thank you for your time today and allowing us to learn from all of your experience.
Thanks so much for inviting me, and I look forward to working with you guys in the future.
Okay, thanks again, Joy, and thank you all for participating today.
Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.